How we doing, boys? Spooky season is upon us, and we all know what that means. Yes, it means the goblins and ghouls will soon frolic into the pumpkin patch, lying in wait, nibbling on the fingers of naughty children, lest they discover the hidden treasures within. It also means I'm going to watch a metric assload of horror movies, because I got banned from Cedar Point Halloweekends for setting the Scarecrow guy on fire, since I thought he was a reanimated scarecrow, and I find other haunted houses too overwhelming. I love horror movies, and to the surprise of probably none of you, for a large portion of my life, movies were a very large creative influence on me. However, in the last few years, as movies that aren't based around dying IPs become harder to find, and my own attention span shrinking to levels that I never thought it would get to, I've found myself watching movies less and less. So I decided to change that, and tackle this project just in time for Halloween. In this process, I hope to reignite my love for movies, as well as ring in the Halloween season in a way that even Jack Skellington would be proud of. Now, of course, when you're looking at the best of something, that opinion is always going to be subjective, right? There's no objective best thing, especially when it comes to art. Everything is just a matter of opinion. Well, that's where you're wrong, buddy. There will always be a best of something, and whoever doesn't think that is an angry loser who's just upset that they have the wrong opinion. But seriously, how do you go about creating a list like this? Well, here's what I did. I went to IMDb, Rolling Stone, Rotten Tomatoes, and Letterboxd and found their lists of the best 100 horror movies of all time. And then I put them into a spreadsheet. I then plugged in a formula which gave me a list of all of the movies that appeared in all 4 of these lists. This came up to 13 movies. Over the past few weeks, I've been researching, watching them, and formulating my own opinions on them. And I've ranked them on my own personal enjoyment from 13 to 1. And I'm proud to present to you the 13 greatest horror movies of all time.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine. Shrieking skulls will shock your soul, seal your doom tonight.
Coming in at number 13, we have Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this is the only movie on the entire list that I really just didn't enjoy. So what do I like about The Shining? I think it looks good. The cinematography in this movie is really great, and there's a lot of very pretty and interesting shots. I think that Shelley Duvall is a very good actress. I think that she sells her fear and horror very well. But other than that, I really don't care for the movie. I think that Jack Nicholson is badly cast here. I don't think that Jack Nicholson's a bad actor, but I think that in all of his movies, he's typecast for a specific reason. He has this manic and crazy energy in every character that he plays, and for a lot of his characters, I think that it works. I really like his version of the Joker specifically for this reason. But I think that in a movie like The Shining, where a character like Jack Torrance is best played as somebody who comes undone over the course of the movie, it stands to reason that having an actor that already has this manic energy from the beginning doesn't really feel like it gives Jack anywhere to go.
See? It's okay. You saw it on the television.
It doesn't feel like there's any subtle undoing of his sanity, because it kind of seems like he's already teetering on the edge to begin with. And even if he is teetering on the edge internally, it's a really good idea to show this kind of change from the outside. And again, Jack kind of looks like he's insane on the outside from the beginning too. I've read a lot of Stephen King's books, but I've actually never read The Shining. And I feel like this is the kind of movie where if you read the book, you might enjoy it a little bit more because you have a little bit more context. But I don't think that this movie delivers on the context that it needs to be truly scary. This is also a movie where I think that since it's been spoofed in pop culture so much, some of the more important moments come across as more silly than they're supposed to.
I was thinking along the lines of no TV and no beer make Homer something something.
Go crazy?
Don't mind if I do!
Stay away from me, Homer!
Give me the bat, Marge! Give me the bat! Give me the bat!
And I really can't think of a scene that exemplifies this more than the scene where Jack is running through the maze trying to catch Danny, because all I could think of in that scene is when South Park parodied The Shining and Randy Marsh is running through the Blockbuster just absolutely unhinged.
I'm coming! I'm coming, son!
I just really couldn't take it seriously because that's all I was thinking about. And obviously that's not The Shining's fault, that's my own fault. But in general, I just didn't enjoy The Shining as much as I enjoyed other entries on this list. That's not to say that I don't enjoy Kubrick's work, though. I enjoyed Full Metal Jacket and A Clockwork Orange, as well as 2001: A Space Odyssey. But as far as The Shining, it really just didn't land for me. Coming in at number 12 on this list, we have Laat den Rat komme in, which translated to American, the only right language, is Let the Right One In. Let the Right One In was released in 2008 in Sweden and is based off of the 2004 book of the same name. The movie tells the story of a 12-year-old boy named Oscar who is bullied at school and frequently fantasizes about getting revenge on those who have done him wrong. Oscar meets a girl named Ely who moves next door to him early on in the movie. Ely only comes out at night and never wears a coat or even shoes. It's revealed pretty early on in the movie that Ely is a vampire and she's being taken care of by a man named Håkan. Sorry, it's one of the first movies I watched, I forgot. Håkan is responsible for a chain of murders that have happened in the area recently because he needs to kill people in order to harvest blood for Ely. During one of these murders, Håkan is eventually caught and burns his own face with acid so that he'd be unrecognizable to the public. Ely, with nobody to harvest for her, begins harvesting blood herself, attacking the local townspeople and causing quite a stir after she targets a specific group of friends. After attacking a local man, she attacks a woman a couple days later, but the attack fails and she has to run off before she's done feeding. As a result, the woman is turned into a vampire. Unable to come to terms with the reality of her situation, however, she begins to fall ill. Eventually, of not being able to deal with the pain of starvation any longer, she commits suicide by having her doctor open the blinds in her hospital room, which allows for the sunlight to get inside and sets her on fire immediately. Oscar begins to fall in love with Ely, and she inspires him to stand up for himself to his bully. As a result of this, however, the bully's older brother eventually tracks Oscar down, and while he's doing his weird daily swim lesson where he swallows half the goddamn pool full of water. I don't understand. This is so frustrating to watch. I hate this. Why are you trying to drink the water, Oscar? Stop it. It's bad for you. It's chlorinated. Anyway, the bully tells Oscar that he can either try to hold his breath underwater for 2.5 or 3 full minutes, or he can get sliced up like a poorly filleted salmon. Oscar tries to hold his head underwater. While Oscar's head is being held underwater, you begin to hear the screams of the bullies above, and you eventually realize that Ely killed nearly all of the bullies except for this one little nerd who never wanted to be a bully in the first place. He wanted to be a dancer. Having just murdered a whole bunch of people, Ely convinces Oscar to run away with her, and the two board a train with her hidden in a suitcase. This movie is quite literally a better love story than Twilight, which I know is a very old meme, but is relevant since it came out the exact same year. And unlike The Shining, I did enjoy this movie, but one of the reasons why it's ranked as low as it is because I didn't really ever find it truly scary, which obviously is a primary criteria for this list. The story is cute, and Oscar and Ely are really nice together, despite their homicidal tendencies. But at no point in this movie was I actually scared in any capacity, and so it comes in at 12. At number 11, we have Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror. And I have complicated thoughts on this movie. It came out in 1922 and is a silent film, and it's such an old film that the dialogue is spoken and then it shows the dialogue on screen for a few seconds afterwards. I mean, it is a very old film, and because of that, I think that it's really hard to judge by modern standards. There are a lot of things I really enjoy about this movie, primarily the music, which of course is the driving force behind a symphony of horror. Max Schreck puts his entire Max Schrussy into playing Count Orlok, and you can damn well tell. And I really appreciate the impact that this movie has had on culture as a whole. It's incredibly important, and I don't think that it's a bad movie, but I also think that judging this movie on modern standards is just very difficult. It's so divorced from what we perceive in the modern era as a movie that it makes it really hard to rank. But I ranked it highly because in the end, I genuinely did enjoy it more than Let the Right One In and The Shining. Since the characters don't have dialogue to fully convey their emotions, they do a very good job at miming everything and acting with their bodies. And of course, actors in movies with dialogue have to do this too, but here it's much more pronounced because it has to be, and it's really interesting to see. However, this movie has some pretty stiff competition, so we have to leave it at 11. We've officially entered the top 10, and at number 10, we have the 1933 classic King Kong. Now, because you're stupid, you're probably saying to yourself, yourself, King Kong's not a horror movie. There's no way that this movie is scary. And I posit to you that, yes, it is. After this movie premiered in 1933, it was so heavily censored that multiple scenes were removed. And I'm just going to read this list right off of Wikipedia because it's crazy. It's a long list. A brontosaurus mauling the crewmen in the water, chasing one up a tree and killing him. Kong undressing Andero and sniffing his fingers. Kong biting and stepping on natives as he attacks the village. Kong biting a man in New York. Kong mistaking a sleeping woman for Anne and dropping her to her death after realizing his mistake. An additional scene portraying giant insects, spiders, a reptile-like creature, a tentacled creature devouring the crew members, shaken off the log by Kong onto the floor of the canyon below, was deemed too gruesome by RKO, even by pre-code standards, and thus the scene was studio self-centered prior to its original release. The original footage is now considered lost forever, with the exception of only a few stills and pre-production drawings. That last scene I mentioned in particular is so amazing to me. I mean, I'm gonna show it to you now. This is the spider pit scene. I mean, like, can we just take a second and acknowledge how incredibly technically difficult that entire scene had to have been to make in 1933? This fight on screen right now with King Kong fighting the T-Rex took 7 weeks to complete. Can you imagine how long the spider pit scene took? I mean, the amount of work that went into this film is just insane. King Kong existed only in a heavily censored form until 1969, when the original print of the movie was found and re-released. But until 1969, the original version of this movie was considered too gruesome for general audiences. And yeah, we can look at this now and laugh about how cheesy it looks, but this movie was a technical marvel when it came out. It literally used every single technology that was available to it at the time to achieve every single one of its special effects. This was also the first talkie movie to have a full score over the entire motion picture. Rather than having music for just certain effects or certain scenes, the entire film has an underscore. And Max Steiner, the man who was in charge for the music on this film, did an excellent job with the task he was given. King Kong, like Nosferatu, is very difficult to compare to the modern landscape, but you can still appreciate it for all the impact that it had on pop culture and culture as a whole. It is unfortunately wrong to talk about King Kong, though, without talking about racial exploitation that came before it, and that made it possible. Namely the exploitation film Inangi. Inangi was a racial exploitation movie that was made in the late 1920s or early 1930s, depending on the source. And the movie was a fake documentary where a crew pretended to go out into the African wilderness and contact an uncontacted tribe that performed certain acts with gorillas. The movie reportedly had a scene where an African woman had a very special relationship with a gorilla. The scene was of course fake and actually filmed in California, but the success of Inangi was what allowed King Kong to be made in the first place. It's the only reason why King Kong was able to be made. And the people that have those complaints aren't wrong. I mean, just because we as a society didn't agree that that thing was bad before doesn't mean that in retrospect it isn't. But when you're looking at art through this kind of lens, I think that you need to take two things into consideration, and that's the broader scope of society at the time, as well as its impact on pop culture as a whole. All in all, I think King Kong earns its place in the top 10 here, though. And we're moving on to number 9. At number 9, we have Robert Eggers' The Witch. The Witch tells the story of a Puritan family who is banished from their village over a religious disagreement, of which the details are mostly unknown. At the beginning of the film, it's implied that this disagreement comes from William seeing himself as more devout than the others in his village. The family finds a piece of land not far from the village that they attempt to farm and settle on their own. Not long after the family begins to get settled, William's wife Catherine gives birth to their youngest son Samuel. While Samuel is under the care of the oldest daughter Thomasin, he disappears. It's quickly revealed that he was killed by a witch in order to make a flying ointment. After the loss of Samuel, Catherine begins to grow more isolated and bitter from her entire family, but mostly towards Thomasin. Over the course of the movie, as Thomasin begins to grow more isolated from her family and they believe that she is under the curse of the witch, more and more things around the farm begin to go wrong. Around the middle point of the movie, the middle son Caleb and Thomasin go into the woods to check traps, and Thomasin and Caleb get separated.
Stop acting like you know the way ahead, like you know the rules. There are no rules, man. We're lost.
While Thomasin makes it back to the house okay, Caleb shows up a couple of days later, naked and delirious, and eventually dies. As Caleb struggles to take his final breaths, he coughs up a blood-soaked apple before collapsing onto the bed and dying. After this, Catherine and William banish Thomasin to the goat barn. Shortly after Thomasin is banished to the goat shed, her final two siblings are abducted by the witch, and her father is gored by their goat, Black Phillip. Catherine flies into a rage and attacks Thomasin with a knife, and Thomasin defends herself, killing her mother. Shocked by her actions, Thomasin retreats into the house until nightfall, where she eventually makes a deal with Black Phillip, who is implied to be the devil. She travels into the woods and finds a coven of witches dancing around a fire, and she decides that she'll do this from now on. Because, I mean, truly, if you can't beat them, join them. While the witch isn't as scary as some of the other entries on this list, what sets it apart is the true feeling of isolation. This movie takes place in the 1690s, and these people are miles away from the nearest sign of any other kind of civilization. You truly get the feeling that they're on their own and they don't have anyone else to turn to. There is just wilderness, and this cold, unforgiving wilderness that William can't even begin to grow crops on creates a very tense backdrop for everything else that happens in this movie. The best shots in this movie are where you can just see the house and its sheer isolation, and Mark Korven's score helps to underlie this just feeling of being alone. The only thing I do have to say about this movie is, for a horror movie, I wouldn't call it underwhelming, but I feel like there was a build-up to something that didn't quite pay off, but it had the potential to be there. I don't know, I think that my goopy goblin brain really just responds well to horror when it's really right up and in my face. Alright, so coming in at number 8, we have 1978's Dawn of the Dead, written, directed, and edited by George Romero. Dawn of the Dead is George Romero's follow-up to the 1968 film Night of the Living Dead, and I love this movie. I had never had a chance to see it before, and I was obsessed with zombies when the world was back in 2012 when we had Zombieland, The Walking Dead, and all the other zombie shit coming out. But I never bothered to entertain Romero's zombie trilogy, and honestly, I think I might give the whole thing a watch after this. It's not to say that zombie films didn't exist before George Romero's films, but Romero solidified what it meant to be a zombie movie in the modern world, and it is fantastic. It's kind of easy when you're watching a movie like Dawn of the Dead and you've seen other zombie media to be like, huh, they're kind of doing all of the zombie tropes. But then you realize that they're inventing all of the zombie tropes. Romero invented all of the modern tropes that we see in zombie media, and that is just so cool. I mean, sure, we've all seen a group of survivors in somewhere like a shopping mall or a grocery store, but this is the movie where an idea like that is first done, and you can see the originality in it. It's really cool. All the characters in this movie, except for Steven, are really likable as well. But every zombie group has to have that one dick that everybody hates and starts to ruin it for everyone at the end. While the main story can feel a little bit tired while you're watching it, especially in the modern era, and if you've consumed a lot of zombie media, you gotta appreciate this for everything that it does first. And the other thing is, watching these people fight zombies is hilarious. Essentially what happens in this movie is a group of 4 survivors, 2 of them being police officers and 2 of them being news reporters, steal a news helicopter and eventually land it at a shopping mall. Eventually they barricade the shopping mall with semi-trucks and kill all of the zombies inside, and live a life of semi-hedonism while they wait out anything that they can. But of course the group of survivors isn't alone for long before raiders discover everything that they have. This hilarious group of bikers just busts into the mall and just starts causing chaos. They talked a lot of shit when they first walked into the mall about finding the survivors and like beating the shit out of them, but at the end of the day, the only thing that they do is just loot the mall and cause havoc. And I love this dude that just decides he's gonna use a sledgehammer and beat these zombies in the chest instead of like walloping in the head and caving their brains in. And I also like this other dude who just does his little jump kicks to he does his little jump kicks that he's gonna kill the zombies, and it's so funny and it's so great. And I love horror movies like this that are just fun to watch, and it doesn't seem like it's taking itself too seriously. This movie is really fun, and it definitely earns its place at number 8 on the list. At number 7, we have John Carpenter's Halloween. Halloween began the slasher film phenomenon that we saw in the 70s and 80s and even into the early 90s, and starred Jamie Lee Curtis, who was appearing in her first film. We all know the story of Halloween at this point. I mean, it's been done over and over so many times that I really don't feel like I need to get too much into it, but I really do love just a couple of things about this movie. Like, first of all, I love how in this movie, Michael Myers knows how to drive a car, and that's something that I never really thought of until this time watching it. But the man was institutionalized at 6, right? So why is he driving a car? Like, I mean, I guess it's not that hard to figure out, but like, it's just incredibly hilarious to me that he's just driving a car with his white Captain Kirk mask and like nobody's really paying attention to him. This movie just has so many great intense moments. Like towards the end of the movie when Laurie's trying to get into the house and she's watching helplessly as Michael walks through the side yard and she's trying to get the keys open and she looks behind her and he's a little bit closer every time she looks behind her before she barely gets in through the front door and manages to shut and lock it and tell the kids to run upstairs. It is a masterclass at building suspense and terror. This entire entity that's like a divine evil that never wavers or never gets tired or never stops. It's just always there. It's that persistence. I also really have to appreciate that John Carpenter wrote this theme, one of the most terrifying themes in all of horror, in a single day. It's also incredibly crazy to me that critics in 1978 really didn't care for this film much, and in retrospect, it's considered one of the year's greatest films. It just goes to show that sometimes works that aren't appreciated in their time can gain traction very quickly once they find their audience. Coming at number 6, we have David Cronenberg's The Fly, starring Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis. Before I saw this movie, the only things that I had seen Jeff Goldblum in were the Jurassic Park movies and Thor Ragnarok. So I didn't realize that Jeff Goldblum really does just kind of play the same guy in every movie that he's in. I mean, that's not a complaint. I think Jeff Goldblum is cool as fuck, but it's just an observation. The movie follows scientist Seth Brundle and journalist Veronica Quaife.
You think farts are funny? Why not quiffs?
And their experimentation with a teleportation device. Brundle wants Veronica to record his progress in transferring organic matter from one place to another, because he states that in its current capacity, his teleporter isn't able to teleport live or organic matter. Veronica documents Brundle's struggle to crack the code on this before they eventually have a massive breakthrough. Shortly after their breakthrough, Veronica has a personal matter she needs to attend to and leaves Brundle by himself. Brundle gets pretty upset about this perceived rejection, and instead of waiting the amount of time that they needed to ensure that the chimp that they transported was free of any kind of issues, Brundle decides he's going to teleport himself. However, in his drunken clumsiness, Brundle allows a fly to get into the teleportation chamber, and the two are teleported together, with their DNA spliced into one being. Over the course of the movie, Brundle begins to transform into a disgusting creature that doesn't even resemble even a fly or a person. He begins to need to vomit over his food in order for it to digest for him. His fingernails begin to fall off and his teeth begin to fall out, and eventually he's completely unrecognizable. The movie is a masterclass in body horror, and it is incredibly uncomfortable to watch even after all these years. It is disgusting and even painful to watch sometimes. The only thing that I could complain about is, unfortunately, the pacing. It doesn't really feel like there's a lot of story for this movie, and you can kind of feel that the runtime is padded out a little bit in a couple of places. It doesn't mean that the movie's bad, it just means that it could have been shorter, but if it were any shorter, it wouldn't really be a full movie either. Along with the wonderful acting, directing, and writing, this movie also has an amazing score written by the legendary Howard Shore, and if you've ever seen the Lord of the Rings movies, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We've officially entered the top 5, and our first entry in that list is Jordan Peele's Get Out, which released in 2017. Daniel Kaluuya and Allison Williams star as Chris and Rose, an interracial couple.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, of course not.
Who is on their way to a trip to meet Rose's family. Shortly after the couple arrives, Chris begins to notice a couple of things that seem a little off. Chris notices pretty quickly that Rose's family has a black couple working for him, and Rose's dad tries to justify this by saying that they were taking care of his elderly parents and he wanted to have them around after they passed so that he didn't let them go and not give them any work, which on the face of it sounds reasonable, you know? But over the course of the film, Chris begins to ignore more and more red flags. Like when Rose's mom hypnotizes him against his will. For me, that would have been the absolute bottom line I'm getting out of here. Eventually it's revealed that Rose's family and her family's friends are part of a secret cult that kidnaps black people and essentially steals their bodies by transferring the part of their brain that has their consciousness into another person. During a party, after Chris accidentally snaps one of these people out of their hypnotism with the flash of a camera, he goes for a walk with Rose and everybody goes about their business. Or so it seems. It turns out they're secretly bidding on Chris for who gets to take his body, and eventually he's sold to a blind art dealer who desperately wants the use of his eyes back. After the party, Chris finds a stack of photos in Rose's closet and begins to piece everything together. He tries to escape the house before he is once again hypnotized by Rose's mom. Waking up strapped to a chair in the basement, he manages to escape after filling his own ears with the stuffing from inside of the chair. From the very moment that Chris and Rose arrive here, you can tell that there's something that's not right. And the thing is you're piecing everything right along with Chris, and sometimes a little bit better than he is. I really love this movie, but I can't help but feeling there's probably a couple of things or some more value that I would get from it if I had a more unique experience in life. And that's not a bad thing. Not all media is made to cater to me, and that's all right. It doesn't mean that I can't still watch it and appreciate it for everything that I enjoy about it, which in this case is almost everything. Allison Williams is really good at portraying Rose as a subtle gaslighter and making Chris feel like everything around him isn't really as bad as it seems. And when you're as good at gaslighting as Rose is, you can make anybody think anything. I also love seeing Stephen Root in dramatic roles. I think it's fantastic, and I'm also always happy to see Stephen Root. That's just the bottom line. I also think that we all have an innate fear of lack of control, and this movie, by creating a situation where you will become a passenger in your own mind forever, is an ultimate nightmare scenario, and it's brilliant. Number 4 is Ridley Scott's Alien, which came out in 1979. And once again, we have a first-time watch for me, and I was blown away by this movie. There's so much to like about this. There's so much to like about this movie, beginning from the opening shot. All of the sets that they have look amazing, and the one word that I would use to describe this movie is claustrophobic.
What does claustrophobic mean?
It means he's afraid of Santa Claus.
No, it doesn't. Ho, ho, ho!
Stop it, Patrick, you're scaring him!
This movie does a really great job of hammering home the fact that not only is the crew isolated, they are confined in an extremely small space. I also love that this movie is a story about corporate greed. You have this crew that was deliberately sent somewhere to be put in danger purely so that they could bring this organism back and it could be harvested for any kind of scientific knowledge or weaponization. And there's no greater cathartic moment when Ripley finally wins against the alien and gets it sucked out of the airlock, and she can finally breathe that sigh of relief after losing so many people that she had worked with and cared about. When the characters are navigating the narrow corridors running from the alien, there's a genuine feeling of tension and fear, and the practical effects make the xenomorph truly terrifying.
Now, who could that be? Good day, and how may I help?
This movie got a couple of genuine oh fucks out of me, and that is getting increasingly hard. It was also very refreshing to have the character who was right about everything the entire time, specifically the female character who was right about everything the entire time, get off without a significantly awful thing happening to her. I mean, yeah, her crew died and she has some psychological damage, but she's alive and she's fine and she didn't have to suffer any significant physical injuries, and that's better than some of the other women on this list. Speaking of, we are now at entry number 3, which is Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby. This movie is one of the greatest psychological horror movies that I have ever seen in my life, and I am so happy that I finally watched it for this list. Mia Farrow and John Cassavetes play Rosemary and Guy Woodhouse, a young couple who have just purchased a new apartment in New York City. And never in my life have I ever wanted to live in 1968 more. You're telling me that 2 people on a commercial actor's income could afford this mansion of an apartment? I'm not saying we should be doing something extreme, but I am saying that the system is broken and I have a guillotine. Moving on. Guy is an upcoming actor who has small parts in commercials and plays, but hasn't quite hit it big yet. And from what I've gathered, Rosemary is a stay-at-home wife. On one of their first nights there, Rosemary meets a young woman in the laundry room, and the two become quick friends. Later that night, Rosemary and Guy hear some ritualistic chanting from the apartment next door, and the following day, this young woman is found dead on the pavement outside. These are all things that you should be paying attention to when you move into a new building. Rosemary and Guy eventually make friends with the elderly couple that this woman was staying with, Minnie and Roman Kostevit. Rosemary finds them pushy and annoying, but ultimately harmless and well-meaning. But Guy begins to spend increasingly more time with Roman. As Guy begins to spend more time with Roman, Rosemary has some very strange dreams. Rosemary's nightmares culminate after being given a strange-tasting chocolate cake by Minnie. In this dream, Rosemary is lying on a bed surrounded by a group of naked elderly people wearing masks. She's powerless to do anything and finds herself paralyzed. This dream becomes much worse when she is by a creature that can only be described as the devil himself. Shortly after this nightmare, Guy approaches Rosemary saying that he wants to have a baby with her, and she becomes incredibly excited with the news. It's not long after this that Rosemary discovers that she's pregnant, and the happy couple begin preparing for their new baby. Rosemary has an absolutely miserable pregnancy, and at every turn, she's immediately dismissed, and her new doctor, who was recommended by Minnie, keeps telling her that the pain will subside in a couple of days, over and over and over again, until the pain lasts for months. During this pregnancy, Guy grows incredibly distant and frustrated with Rosemary. He's practicing for a part in a play that could be really big for him, a part which he only got because the actor who was supposed to play this part, and he became blind shortly after Rosemary's nightmare. With the help of a family friend, Rosemary begins to grow suspicious of the things that are happening around her. She begins researching witchcraft and occult rituals, and begins to form a theory that her neighbors are actually devil worshippers. Rosemary eventually discovers that Roman is a descendant of one of New York City's first warlocks. Rosemary begins to theorize that these old people next door want to do something with her baby, to use it for some sort of horrible ritual. She tries to go to Guy for help, but he's increasingly disinterested and agitated. Having nowhere to go, Rosemary tries to contact another doctor for help. She tries to explain her entire situation, and at first, it looks like this doctor is actually going to help her. But because this is the 1960s and wives are seen as an extension of their husbands, he actually just contacts her husband and her other doctor and releases her to them. With nowhere else to go, Rosemary resigns herself to her situation, and when she goes into labor, she's forced to give birth in her own apartment, the pain of which makes her pass out, and when she awakens, she's told that her baby is dead. But as she hears her baby's cries from next door, she refuses to believe it. She eventually grabs a kitchen knife and sneaks into her neighbor's apartment, where she finds the most peculiar sight. In the center of Minnie and Roman's living room is a bassinet, draped in black with an upside-down cross hanging over it. We're never given a full look at the baby, but Rosemary's eyes go wide and she covers her mouth at the abomination that lays before her, and Roman reveals that this baby is the child of the devil. Her nightmare was a reality, and Guy, the man who she trusted to keep her safe no matter what, was the one who let it happen. And he let it happen in exchange for fame.
I didn't do fucking shit. I didn't fucking do this. I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about any of this. I'm done.
This movie was released at the height of the Satanic Panic, and I think that's one of the reasons why it did so well, but it's also so upsetting. Rosemary's right the entire time, and she's being gaslit by everybody around her to think that she's crazy and that there's nothing wrong. Only one other movie has made me feel quite the same way as this one, but we'll be getting to that soon. At number 2 on the list, we have Yan Sang-ho's Train to Busan, which released in 2017. This is only one of 2 foreign movies on this list, and that is a shame, but I love Train to Busan. The movie follows a largely absent father and his daughter, who are traveling to Busan for his daughter's birthday so that she can see her mother. We're introduced to a lot of other side characters, including my favorite character, this lovable Dick and his pregnant wife. The characters all board the KTX 101 from Seoul to Busan. Just after the train departs the station, though, a woman runs on board, suffering a mysterious illness. Shortly after she boards, she turns into a zombie and begins infecting everybody on the train. I really appreciate this movie breathing new life into the zombie genre by giving it a new and interesting setting. A train that physically cannot be stopped and has a tube full of hundreds of people is a perfect setting for a zombie movie. And just as soon as this woman reanimates, the movie kicks into high gear. This particular virus turns people very quickly. I'm talking within seconds. So the survivors don't really have a whole lot of time to scramble, think on their feet, and get to safety before everybody on the train starts to turn. This movie does a lot of new things with the zombie genre like this, and for an American like me who's used to having zombie movies filled with weapons and guns, it's interesting to see that perspective change in another country where those things aren't as widely available and how you can survive in a situation like that. There's one scene in particular that perfectly exemplifies this, where 3 of the main characters are armed with only bats and a makeshift riot shield to get through train cars to rescue some of the other survivors. Honestly, my only complaint about this movie is that the main character dies, because yes, it does create a more tragic story that he'll never be able to have a relationship with his daughter that he wanted. Obviously, that tragedy elevates the movie, and you can't expect happy endings with horror movies, but it was just a little disappointing. Remember when I said that only one other movie made me feel the way Rosemary's Baby did? It's our number 1 pick, and it's Ari Aster's 2018 film, Hereditary. From the very first scene, this movie absolutely captivates me every single time. For this video, this was my 3rd time watching the movie, and honestly, I am still just as blown away as the first time. There are so many things to love about this movie, from the quiet, serene backdrop that contrasts so excellently with a disintegrating family dynamic. The said disintegrating family dynamic itself creating every single tense moment. From the beginning, you can kind of tell that this family hasn't functioned very well for a long time. And the death of Charlie early on, less the catalyst for this disintegration, but more the final nail in its coffin. And watching this movie, you feel awful for every member of the family. You feel awful for Charlie, whose life was cut short. You feel awful for Peter, who has to bear the responsibility of the death of his sister. Even though he's a shithead kid, it was still an accident, but nobody in his life will seem to let him forget that. You feel awful for Annie, who lost her youngest child and who's never going to be able to have a good relationship with her other one. And I even feel awful for the husband, whose name I didn't bother to remember, because even though he's kind of an asshole and not supportive of anybody, he seems like he's barely holding on. And in the same way that Rosemary is constantly being disregarded by everybody around her, so is Annie for the entirety of this movie. She's constantly being put down or talked to like she's crazy, and yeah, she does have some mental issues, but it's like everybody in her life has just forsaken her. The pieman angle is something that comes secondary, but it does still tie in excellently to everything that you've learned. I mean, watching this movie for the 2nd time, you pick up on everything that's obvious from the beginning. More than anything, more than pieman, more than any sort of demon-related nonsense that happens, this movie is about a family and what can happen to it if they lack the support to help each other. The final 20 minutes of this movie are the most horrified I ever felt watching a movie, especially my first time. For the first month after I watched this movie, I spent an embarrassing amount of time looking into corners of dark rooms to make sure that there weren't any creatures lurking about. Hereditary isn't just my favorite horror movie, it's one of my favorite movies, period. And I'm incredibly happy that it made it to this list. That is the end of our list, and I'm looking at my recording right now, and I have 2 hours and 32 minutes recorded, so we're gonna see how long this boy ends up. It might be a long one. If you like this video, please consider giving me a like or subscribing to my channel. I'm really trying to grow organically. I would love to be able to make this my full-time job someday, and all of that support gets me one step closer. As always, my name is Isaiah, and thank you for watching my video.
These skeletons speak with such a screech. You'll shake and shudder in surprise when you hear these zombies shriek.
We're so sorry, skeletons, you're so misunderstood. You only want to socialize, but I don't think we should.
A spooky